Someone once told me at the University of Wollongong, there used to be for the students in the student cafeteria a hot, wet dish. And someone bought the noodles, and there were two stories. There's one, they bought the noodles and it had a giant clump of hair in it. And someone else bought the noodles and there was money in it. Now they're both really disturbing, but I like the idea that my pot could be like a bowl of noodles with money in it. If I can make pots like that, I'd be really happy. I don't like the hair. Vessels are so compelling and they are ageless, and it is that ambiguity thing about it's not a sculpture, it's a pot. But is it? Because it doesn't really work, so maybe it is a sculpture. And I quite like art that works on really simple binaries like inside, outside, hard, soft. Those simple things are around because they're compelling for eternity. There are certain motifs that I keep coming back to, and so the garden forms occur all the time in my work, especially succulents and cacti. I've used on a lot of these new pots the face of William Morris. He is a designer that I really admire and that people know his work. I quite like it that now I can sort of chuck him in there and he opens up all these other associations. There's this idea of the horror vacui, the fear of empty space, and that's sort of what I have. I think you can see a lot of me in these just because of they're almost about my hands. Irony and humour, I'm not sure where it exists in the work. It's funny, to me the work is sort of quite sad. I think people think I am a funny guy and I don't take things too seriously, but I sort of really do. I sort of take things so seriously that I have to hide it behind humour. I do often say, yeah, people say, what's your work like? And I say, it's like someone did a shit and they found a $2 coin in it. It's clay, it's like poo, it's scatological. And I like it that you can make this really brilliant, shiny thing out of this really base, ugly material. Like, it's quite compelling. You turn it into something like that's eternal. I've had things here where I've fired them and then I've gotten them out of the kiln and I've gone, oh, I've really fucked it up. And then you show it to someone and they're like, wow, that's the best thing you've ever made. And it's like, really? I think it's a piece of shit. And they're like, no, that's amazing. And then you start to think this is either going to end up at the MCA or Berry Dump. I think both places are fantastic. Between the tip and the museum is the place to be. Maybe more towards the tip.
Being a wood fire potter, well, I was always a believer of fire is your friend. You can use it as a tool. And I still feel fire is a friend. But they're not all friendly, are they? So, yeah. We got burnt down in the 2020 bushfires here at Cobargo. We came to the studio area, but there was a lot of firewood stacked here. I was ready to do a firing. It was all up by the buildings. And then we went to our house and stayed up there as the fire front came through and protected our house. We came back to this studio, after an hour or two when we thought, oh, the house is right here. And no, everything was on fire and we didn't even drive in the gate. We just had a look from the gateway and thought, it's too dangerous to go down there and there's nothing you can do anyway, so we just let it all burn. We had a studio full of pots ready to do a firing, all the wood to do a firing. That's about, 5 months worth of working. Yeah. And it destroyed all of it. Nothing of that survived. I haven't done a firing for 2 years now. I did have still a bit of a trickle of an income because there was always work out there that didn't get destroyed. But as that sold, I had nothing to replace it with. I've got a gallery in Sydney, one in Mittagong, a few local ones down here. This work in this kiln is to replace those shops and galleries I had. So yeah, it's important to me to get a good lot of pots so I've got some quality work to take out again. There'd be about 600 kilos of clay made into pots, or 700 kilos of clay. But there's probably 500, 600, 700 pieces in there. It is a bit like returning to the beginning, yeah. And it's fairly frustrating, there's no doubt about it, especially when you're doing jobs you know you've done before. This firing we're doing is going to take us about 100 hours. We started with a fire on the outside of the kiln, letting it just suck in the air holes. And then we put a fire in the chamber. We'd like to have a crew of 6 people, and we split it into 3 8-hour shifts. It's a very natural process, and it's all about the flame travelling through the kiln and depositing ash in the firing, and how you fire your kiln and the fuel you use is what determines what the surfaces and the colours are like. That makes everything individual, so every pot in there is going to be different to the one beside it. We're putting probably about a wheelbarrow of wood every 5 or 10 minutes into it. And once all the wood's turned into charcoal, it's time to restoke. This is day 3 now. It's probably about 1200 degrees in there. It needs to burn for a little bit more. You've got to get to 1300, even if they're 20 or 30 degrees short, that's going to be noticeably short. Will be half of the wood is used just in the last 100 degrees, and half of the time. So the last 40 hours, it'll take us probably 40 hours to get 100 degrees now. We're about 95 or 100 hours in, and we've got 1320 degrees in the front and probably 1280 to 1300 degrees up in the main chamber. And these guys are having a big stoke to finish it off. This is how you want to finish the roaring hot white fire.
Beautiful. Well done. It's quite nice.
You always have ideas in your head of how good it could be, and then it takes you a week or 2 to get used to it. You've got to learn to live with them for a little while. They look nice. Feel good in your hand. They've got a fair few dollars in there. It's like money in the bank. But, you know, dollars to effort, no. Too much effort. Too much effort. It's just a love of the process, really. You're working with Mother Nature because it's all the elements of earth, water, fire. It's nice to be creating things through fire. We need it as a tool. I'm like a creature of habit. I don't know anything else anymore, so I've just got to keep going.
Syracuse, New York, 1989. The famous scarab vase by Adelaide Alsop Robineau disappeared. It was discovered that thieves stole away the vase and vanished into the night. No one knew where it went, and if the Mona Lisa of the ceramic world would ever return. I've watched thee, scarab. Yea, an hour in vain I've watched thee, slowly toiling up the hill, pushing thy lump of mud before thee still, with patience infinite and stubborn strain. Strive as thou mayst, spare neither time nor pain, to screen thy burden from all chance of ill. Push, push with all a beetle's force of will. Thy ball, alas, rolls ever down again. The scarab vase celebrated the unknown craftspeople of the world. These craftsmen and women were stonecutters, metalsmiths, potters, and fiber artists. Many are only now titled in art museums and books as the unknown. Robineau spent 1,000 hours sculpting her famous scarab vase. The work was influenced by the Art Deco movement and Egyptian revival, which was motivated by the opening of King Tut's tomb in 1922. But like all beautiful masterworks of art, there are always problems and solutions that lead up to the masterpiece. Adelaide Alsop Robineau excelled in a world that was led and dominated by male artists in the craft art movement. She was not without her peers, as other artists like her also began to excel and organize in their field. The Women's Guild of Arts, established in 1907, provided a platform for female artisans to collaborate, make connections, and gain professional status. It included Mary May Morris, a jeweler and embroiderer, Marie Zimmerman, a jeweler, Julia Morgan, the first licensed female architect in California, Florence Kohler, a jeweler, and Adelaide Robineau, a ceramicist. Adelaide Alsop was born in Middleton, Connecticut in 1865. As a young art student, she studied painting with William Merritt Chase and also began learning china paints. Her abilities as a china painter and watercolor artist were recognized, and she was given the opportunity to both teach and exhibit her work. Adelaide studied ceramics in summer school with Charles Binns at Alfred University in upstate New York. As a young woman, she moved to Syracuse, New York, met Sam Robineau, and fell in love. Sam was a French potter and ceramicist, and started a ceramic studio magazine in Syracuse. Sam and Adelaide were soon married and had 3 children. Adelaide was a loving mother. Once, her daughter had torn her stocking. Adelaide repaired the stocking with a decorative spiderweb stitch to close up the tear. Adelaide continued to practice ceramics and china painting, and experimented with porcelain clay bodies and carving elaborate forms. Sam encouraged her to not use the standard blanks and create her own forms to work from. She would carve with a metal crochet needle. Not all experiments work, and accidents sometimes happen. After spending 1,000 hours carving the vase, decorated with hundreds of scarabs, the piece cracked during its first firing. Most potters would be devastated, but she knew how to repair it by packing the crack with fire clay mixture and firing the piece again. The scarab vase was produced while Adelaide was teaching at the American Women's League in University City, Missouri, and it went on to win the grand prize in pottery at the Turin International Exhibition in 1910. While this brought her fame, she continued to teach and maintain a studio, Robineau Pottery. The University of Syracuse honored her with a doctorate in 1917, and she taught classes there from 1920 to 1929. When the Metropolitan Museum of Art began purchasing contemporary ceramics, her work was the first to be acquired, and after her death, she became the first artist potter given a retrospective there. Adelaide Alsop Robineau began work on her final piece, the Cinerary Urn. It was never completed, as she passed away in 1929 and her husband Sam died soon after. Having both passed into the afterlife, they joined together again in the very urn she created for them. Much of the Robineau collection was sold to the Everson Museum, and in 1968, a young Chinese-American architect, I.M. Pei, was hired to design the new Everson Museum building. The crown jewel of the Everson was missing. The thing that tripped up the thieves was a Polaroid picture they took of the artwork. They brought it to antique collectors around New York City to try to sell the vase. One antique collector knew of the piece and contacted the FBI. The vase was soon returned and put into storage until it was time for it to return for public viewing. On April 27, 1990, the Great Scarab vase was put back on display at the Everson Museum. After an arduous journey, the vase had found its way home.
We're afraid to become who we really are, afraid to sacrifice the security and the comfort of our day job, afraid to admit that it's killing our souls. We'll tell ourselves, you have a mortgage, a family, a legitimate excuse. But our soul grows weaker and weaker. We lied to ourselves. We lied to ourselves long enough that we could no longer hear our own true voice. We keep quiet, so no one would know we are failing at our true calling. It becomes our deep, dark secret. It keeps you awake at night because you know deep down you have betrayed yourself. The more we don't demand the best from ourselves, we become our worst self. We could kill our own souls. My work is my interpretation of the ancient Japanese clay figurines and talismans. In the belief that they protect our souls, a talisman to have the courage to live our life as truthfully as we can. My work is my journey to strengthening my soul. Please join me if you like. Especially you who are ready to take on your maximum challenge. One you have longed for in your heart, longer than you care to admit. Let us stand up, our souls united. All my power to you. I salute you.
This is about the design process for Fire in the Belly, a clay and metal sculpture I made with my friend Robin DuPont, who specialises in atmospheric and wood firing techniques. I'm a metal and clay artist, and for our collaboration, my aim was to develop a metalwork design that Robin and I felt united his wood-fired porcelain jar with a new material. I felt the piece needed rich colours and strong textures, and I started with a large sheet of recycled brass whose previously worked surface gave me lots of free detail. I worked intuitively, inspired by the full shape of the pot and the swirling flames that would have embraced it in the wood kiln. I found it joyful to let some early designs go and look around for more ideas. It was fun to change things quickly as Robin told me what he was enjoying in all the samples I made. We settled on the 2 curving metal forms with hand-chased fine detail. Through our collaborative process, we've created something new to both of us, and each piece might now seem lost without its partner.
I knew when I first touched clay that this is it. When I'm working with clay, when I'm throwing, I am present. Nothing else really exists. Like I'm not thinking about or worrying about other things. I'm just here. It's a great therapy that ends up creating art. I'm Shauna McLeod, owner-maker of Black Crow Pottery. The very first time I sat down at the wheel, I was hooked. Like, I just knew this was it. And I loved it instantly. In the last year and a half when I've been through it and, been off work and struggling with my mental health, this is my safe space. Just to be in here gives me comfort. So I worked for 17 years, first as a paramedic and then as an emergency medical dispatcher. And so it's a lot to be a participant in and a witness to most people's worst days. And so it just took its toll. You can't be emotional. You can't experience those emotions during that time. My job was to look after everybody else, but I wasn't looking after me. In a very short amount of time, I had, after breast cancer, and then my mom got sick, her partner passed away, a lot of things all in a really short amount of time, and I felt like I just hit my limit. And so I left work, and I've been off work for about 15 months now. When my therapist told me last winter that she thought I was experiencing depression, I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm not depressed, because I had this stereotypical concept of what depression looks like, and mine didn't look like that. I would never judge somebody else, but I judge me. Right? Like, I was never critical of any of my friends or coworkers that left, but I am, is this because I'm weak?
I love watching her process and just sort of how her thoughts will then get into what she's doing. We met at a birthday party of a friend of ours, almost 21 years ago in April.
She's had to adjust just as much as I have.
This last show that she did, where she really got at the feelings of trauma from lots of different parts of her life, and she was really able to kind of put those feelings into the pottery. So I think that was really helpful for her mental health.
I chose urns for this show partially because I wanted to symbolically lay worries or fears to rest. This one's talking about the healing that I do and how the horse therapy that I've been doing is helping to heal. It's not tangible. You can't say you do step 1, 2, and 3 and you get result A, B, and C. This is taking care of myself. Helping looking after him is self-care. And it just feels really nice.
Flair stands for Facilitating Life Skills and Relationships. We just get to do it uniquely alongside horses. Primarily, my heart is with first responders. I'm a 13-year volunteer firefighter. I came from a first responder background. My grandfather was 35 years in the RCMP. My biological mom was a dispatcher. So I came from knowing the lack of resources available.
You can't make it up. You can't usually explain it in words. It's an experience unlike any other. It's hard to put a price tag on a really personal piece of art. And I am always wondering, who's going to want to buy a piece that's about me? But what I've learned is that the really personal stuff, it often connects to someone else and their own, you know, whether it's their own story or a family member's. And so it's connecting to another person through artwork. After my diagnosis with PTSD and the depression that kind of came in, I was kind of hopeless, and I was concerned, worried that it would never get better because it doesn't go away. It's always there. I'm just learning how to manage it, and some days are better than others. It's different today than it was a year ago, and I suspect it'll be different in another year.
I'm really proud of the work that she does, and you know, I'm really happy to, you know, to be a support.
What's next, I actually don't know. Like right now, I'm focused on healing. I guess I see the ability to use clay to communicate things that I maybe don't express well verbally. It's a whole other way to connect. And that's the beauty of art.
It is pure luck that we wound up in Twillingate. Myself and Jason have been talking about moving rural for a couple of years. It's this wonderful location. It's right on the main road. Big open space, huge windows. It's right by the ocean. There is no reason not to put a pottery studio in here.
People coming into the studio this summer We're always asking, why did I move to Twillingate? And I'm still very confused by that. It's just stunning.
It's just this gorgeous building in this really fascinating town. It just doesn't stop being pretty. There's trails, and every time you turn a corner, there's something interesting to see. CUP comes from Clay and Unlimited Possibilities. It's the full name of the company. I mostly just wanted something that could be abbreviated to some sort of a pottery-related word. Most of what the business does is wholesale work for our clients. The studio itself is a chance for myself and Jason to sort of showcase our own lines, our own ideas.
As a maker, I really love explaining things to people, explaining how things were made, and because for me, how things are made is why things are made.
All of my work really is done on the wheel. There's something about the feel of the clay that I've always really enjoyed. The tactility of throwing is something that I've always found very grounding. As challenging as it is to learn that skill, once you've got it down, it's just magical to be able to start with a lump of clay and have a functioning piece.
I think I work in like loose patterns. I obviously love repeats. Very process oriented, so everything from tool marks to I don't know, accidents that happen along the way, discoveries, I guess, inventions, accidents.
My work is mostly functional. I always really loved the idea of art that you interact with on sort of a daily basis. So, and of course that's the whole point of pottery, is something that you're picking up and eating from. People develop really intimate relationships with, you know, their favorite cereal bowl or their favorite coffee mug. I hope that when they leave, they've got an idea of what it takes to make something by hand in clay. I want them to have an idea of the amount of time and care that's gone into the mug or the bowl or whatever it is that they're leaving with. And I hope that they found something that they'll enjoy and that'll be a part of their day for however many years to come.
Je m'appelle Lauriane Thibodeau, je suis céramiste et sculpteur entre autres. Je m'intéresse beaucoup à comment un objet change de fonction, change d'impact et émane quelque chose de différent quand on le change de contexte. J'aime bien fabriquer des objets que les gens peuvent reconnaître, mais j'aime en détourner le sens, détourner la fonction, de voir quelles conséquences j'ai créées avec toutes les causes que j'ai mises en place. Puis c'est là où la réaction du public, la réaction de mes pairs, la réaction de quelqu'un que je ne connais pas, c'est là où il y a une part de magie qui opère ou qui opère pas. Je travaille avec l'argile locale de plus en plus. Quand je dis local, ça peut être l'argile urbaine, donc j'utilise l'argile de mes collègues, ceux qui ne recyclent pas leur argile ou ceux qui en ont trop. Pour moi, l'argile locale va jusque-là. Et j'intègre aussi d'autres minéraux. Par exemple, quand je fais de la cuisson raku, je peux très bien utiliser le sol qui est autour de moi pour venir l'imprimer dans la glaçure molle et malléable. Moi, j'adore travailler avec l'argile industrielle aussi, mais il y a un caractère vraiment unique dans le fait de travailler avec le sol qui se trouve en dessous de nos pieds. Je trouve qu'on est rendu là dans notre société, non seulement à vouloir manger local puis acheter des produits locaux, mais fabriquer avec des essences et des matériaux locaux. Je pense que c'est drôlement pertinent à notre époque. Je ne pense pas que je m'implique autant dans le milieu artistique, dans le milieu céramique en particulier, parce que j'en ai réellement envie. Je pense que j'ai besoin de sentir que je fais partie de quelque chose de plus grand que moi, plus grand que ma pratique. J'espère qu'en céramiste, on va se rendre compte qu'on s'apporte beaucoup, puis qu'il faut nourrir ça en fait pour la suite. J'ai vraiment besoin du grandiose de faire ensemble. Puis non seulement je le trouve dans les organismes où je m'implique, dans les événements auxquels je m'implique aussi, mais également à travers l'enseignement. Pour moi, c'est plus que d'être en mode de partage, c'est un besoin en fait de sentir les conséquences de ce que je peux transmettre tout de suite, là, immédiatement. Je suis pas très patiente. Donc l'enseignement, pour moi, c'est très concret, très tangible comme répercussion. Il y a décidément des objets récurrents qui reviennent beaucoup dans mes recherches des dernières années. La contenance, le contenant en tant que tel est très présent. À la base, je me suis considérée comme potière, mais je vois que je continue à faire des contenants, que ce soit des urnes funéraires, les camions, pour moi, sont des contenants fascinants dans lesquels on peut insérer le corps pour les utiliser. Je trouve ça vraiment magnifique. Beaucoup de nouvelles technologies avec des anciennes technologies. Présentement, je fabrique des iPads avec fonction très limitée, mais je pense font un bon mélange d'anciens, de très anciens et de nouveaux. Je m'intéresse à plusieurs objets de ce type. Je suis animée par le fait de faire ensemble. Même quand je fais mon travail solo en atelier, il y a toujours cette envie d'aller vers les gens à travers le langage des arts visuels, qui est son propre langage en tant que tel. Je pense que c'est une envie de communication, en fait, même quand je suis seule en atelier et que j'apprécie vraiment beaucoup cette solitude-là.
माटी कहे कुम्हार से तू क्या रोन दे मोए, एक दिन ऐसा आएगा मैं रोन दूंगी तुम्हें।
Grande cos'è? Welcome to the Criterion Special Edition of Garage.
या घट भीतर सात समंदर, याही में नदियां नारा, या घट भीतर चंदा सूरज, याही में नौलख तारा।
For me, it's like become something that I don't even think so much about. I feel like sometimes my hands just like do it, especially when it's real work. There's not a lot of thought that goes into like, what do I have to do to make this shape? It's usually just like instinctual, just in those moments of calm nothingness almost, that I find myself being able to be inspired and come up with ideas. And my mind kind of wanders, and before I know it, I'm just done. My mom was a pottery collector, and watched her really love and care for these pieces. It hit me how much it meant to her, and how much somebody can value and care for an object. And then it was when I got into high school that I actually sat down at the wheel and touched clay for the first time. It was a really humbling experience because it looks so easy when people do it. I just thought, you know, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna make this, and I made nothing. But I came back and I did it again and again and again until I made something, and then worked on perfecting that thing. I don't know, I think it's made me feel good to overcome all of that frustration. The progression of seeing just like flops of clay on the side of the wheel, on the ground, coming out of the studio with absolutely nothing, to months later coming out with, you know, a few beautiful pieces. And even now it's just like, there's so much to learn. I just feel like I'll never run out of, you know, I just won't ever master it. There's a fine line between what IKEA and CB2 and, you know, like all these other design companies are doing to make these factory-made ceramics look handmade, like something actually being handmade, and it's not going to look the same every time, and that's kind of what's special about it. I think I used to feel a lot more pressure to like be a machine. I've definitely let go of that a little bit more and kind of embraced the fact that like I think it's cool when things have like a weird glaze strip somewhere, or like maybe like a finger marking at the bottom of the cup where you can see where somebody's fingers have been throwing. And I think I'm trying to kind of push myself a little bit, embrace those things. I'm Amanda Paddock, and I make ceramics.
I probably see myself more as a maker than a glazer. I think one of the questions that's often asked of me is, oh, you don't introduce a lot of colour into your work. I just don't think there's room for colour in my work because I spend so much time actually making. I love the way there's so many things you can do with the material. It's endless, the possibilities. You can squeeze it, you can stretch it, you can cut it, you can dimple it, you can tear it. I'm totally infatuated with making things out of clay. I think it comes from a very strong heritage in my family of making crafted objects. Generations of people that have built things to live. I think it is inherent though, I think it is nature, not necessarily nurture. That calm that comes over you when you're working with your hands is something that I think I was born with. It's a really slow material. It makes you slow down and focus on being really gentle. You've got to be really kind to this material because it's really responsive. When I come into the studio and I work every day, it's almost like a form of meditation. I'm just so grateful that I can sit here and just make things for a living. Everyone has these stories, this dialogue that is constantly rolling. And if I don't work with clay, I don't get a chance to sort that dialogue out. Once I've had a day in the studio, I feel like I can cope with pretty much anything else in my life because of the peace that working with a material as beautiful as clay allows.
Jadi selain Jinjit Pottery yang merupakan keramik craft saya juga aktif di membuat keramik yang seni. Jadi seperti ini judulnya adalah Ibu Kucing. Jadi waktu itu saya ikut pameran nurture di Jogja. Terus kebetulan temanya adalah nurture, jadi saya mau ekspresikan bagaimana saya senang dengan kucing. Dan ini ceritanya ya bunga-bunga di taman lah gitu. Ya kenapa saya senang dengan seni juga selain craftnya itu adalah karena di sini saya bisa mengekspresikan hal-hal yang saya ingin ekspresikan. Ini adalah karya saya lainnya yaitu Morning Breeze termasuk dalam Morning Happiness Series. Dan ini pembuatannya menggunakan beberapa teknik yaitu coils, slab dan juga hand building dan memakan waktu sampai sekitar 2 minggu sampai selesai dibakar.
Saya suka keramik karena dia bisa dipegang gitu. Jadi pada saat saya mengerjakan keramik semua sense-nya tuh bekerja gitu. Dari pikiran saya, dari ide saya, dari tangan saya, semua panca indera saya tuh bekerja karena dia kan 3 dimensi. Kalau 2 dimensi ya sama aja sih, cuman kan lebih feel-nya saya lebih suka aja. Ini salah satu karya yang saya buat. Saya dalam berkarya itu biasanya saya terinspirasi oleh dari macam-macam ya, dari saya membaca, saya lihat nonton film atau saya dengar musik gitu. Jadi ada kalimat-kalimat yang menyentuh gitu. Oh ini kayaknya saya bisa jadikan untuk ide berkarya. Jadi karya ini nih saya buat waktu itu untuk pameran di Museum Keramik yang temanya itu kalau tidak salah keramik kuno. Nah saya sempat bingung juga bikin apa, cuman waktu itu kebenaran saya habis nonton film yang ada tentang Chinese opera. Filmnya itu Farewell My Concubine yang main Leslie Cheung ya. Saya lihat kok bajunya bagus gitu, ya sudah saya coba bikin. Motifnya ini saya ambil yang simple saja dari piring-piring kuno ya gitu, bener-bener piring kuno. Jadi saya gambar di bagian bajunya gitu.
Saya biasa buat keramik di workshop di rumah. Jadi saya kapan saja bisa buat. Dan saya kebanyakan buat tuh lewat tengah malam karena suasananya mendukung ya, sepi, tenang, tidak ada yang ganggu, tidak rame. Di sana saya bisa berkarya. Karya saya berjudul Ibu Bumi, Mother Earth, karena keprihatinan saya dengan keadaan bumi kita yang sekarang yang makin parah, rusak. Nah, jadi saya menggambarkan ini bumi itu adalah kandungan seorang ibu. Di sini saya menggunakan motif batik Sekar Jagat yang menggambarkan Sekar Jagat menggambarkan bumi dengan aneka macam motif tumbuhan yang menggambarkan bumi kita. Dan ini adalah ibu yang menjaga seorang anak dengan anaknya, di mana ini menggambarkan ibu ini melindungi bumi kita. Begitu konsep saya tentang karya ini.
Influence itu guru saya ya, Pak Kengsin. Ya dia suami saya sebenarnya. Dia ngajar keramik, kemudian saya diajak teman, lalu saya mulai buat keramik. Mulainya ya biasa aja buat-buatnya, tapi lama-lama kok kayaknya ini cocok buat saya gitu. Saya senang bikin keramik jadinya. Ya ini karya saya nih yang nggak terakhir sih, tapi yang terakhir pameran. Nah ini karya saya menggambarkan ikan ya, ikan di laut. Nah saya itu suka taruh gambar ikan di karya-karya saya karena saya suka pergi ke laut. Saya suka diving, saya suka snorkeling, terus suka mancing juga. Nah ini nih ikan, kebetulan ini ikan Trevally ya, Jack ya. Orang sini bilangnya ikan kue ya, gitu. Nah ini yang saya gambar kali ini itu seperti itu. Nah ini prosesnya coiling ya, tekniknya menggunakan teknik coiling. Itu pewarnaannya saya pakai kobalt, birunya itu pakai kobalt. Kesulitannya ini sebenarnya nggak sulit, cuman kita harus sabar karena coiling dari bawah ke atas kan. Jadi kita melalui beberapa tahap. Yang paling bawah kalau udah kering baru kita bisa tambahkan. Lalu setelah itu kita bisa naikkan lagi sampai yang kita tinggi yang kita mau ya gitu. Inspirasi untuk keramik bisa dari mana aja ya. Di antaranya bisa dari alam gitu.
Senang membuat keramik ya, soalnya dengan membuat keramik itu kita itu bisa kayak melepaskan stres ya, bisa kayak terapi untuk jiwa kita, karena membuat keramik itu kita bisa menuangkan ide apa saja ya, dari sebongkar tanah yang tidak berbentuk itu bisa menjadi sesuatu gitu. Kedua karya saya ini adalah saya namakan sahabat karena mereka memang satu set ya, dan ini dibikin dengan teknik coil yang dibentuk sampai tinggi. Yang khusus dari karya ini saya buat dengan teknik hand build ya, dibangun layer per layer sampai tinggi. Dan yang unik dari ini yang sangat khas adalah cara pembakarannya, teknik pembakaran raku, di mana tanahnya sendiri sudah dicampur dengan media khusus, dan pada saat pembakaran 900 derajat itu dikeluarkan pada saat masih membara dan dicelupkan ke dalam serbuk gergaji sehingga menimbulkan bara api lagi dan ada asap yang akan menyelimuti tanah-tanah ini, sehingga memberikan efek-efek retak-retak yang smoky gitu. Pewarnaannya juga khusus ya untuk pembakaran raku yang dimana glasir itu harus bisa lumer di 900 derajat. Selain berkarya sendiri, saya juga membuka kelas hobi untuk siapa saja yang ingin belajar membuat keramik. Dan saya punya studio galeri kolekan di mana saya bisa beraktivitas keramik.
Saya membuat keramik mulai tahun 98, waktu itu bertemu guru saya, Lim Keng Sin. Sejak itulah saya sangat tertarik dengan keramik. Jadi pertama karena media tanah liat fleksibel, jadi bisa banyak barang benda yang bisa kita buat dari tanah liat. Dari yang paling sederhana misalnya batu bata gitu, sampai mungkin yang lebih rumit lagi banyak. Nah dari situ, dari fleksibilitas itu menurut saya terbuka banyak pilihan untuk saya mau bikin apa yang bisa dibuat dari keramik. Kami kebetulan saya tertarik pada alat makan. Guru saya juga bikin alat makan, tapi dia lebih macam-macam lagi, ada patung, ada segala macam, segala bentuk deh. Tapi saya banyak alat makan dipengaruhi juga oleh teman baik guru saya, yaitu Pak Suyatna. Dia juga jadi guru saya. Mulai dari dialah saya bikin alat makan. Ya pertama karena sederhana, saya senang lihat makanan, lalu makanan butuh tempatnya, jadi cuma itu aja, sederhana itu gitu. Kadang-kadang juga bikin yang lain, misalnya gambar, jadi gambar di atas seramik, tapi juga sering gambar itu kita terapkan di atas alat makan.
As a ceramist, I try to apply an experimental idea into my art practice, bringing the pottery making process to the outdoors. It helps to confront the situation I am facing. Somehow lonely, lost, unstable, and nowhere to go. I am, however, telling myself to remain calm, to even overcome those obstacles and uncertainties, such as wheel flooring on the boat. I have to find the center point to stand for. I chose to create this site-specific work as a metaphor. I still have to withdraw from instability and fear while being independent. This isolated boat surrounded by nature, so I can strongly feel the beauty of loneliness. When we think about art as memories, art as objects, art as a place, it is not difficult to find the relationship between the land, clay, and the artist.
She's a maniac on the floor. And she's mopping like she's never mopped before. 'Cause she's a smooth moperator. Smooth moperator.
No need to ask, he's a smooth operator.